Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
This is our YouTube channel. Subscribe to this channel. We appreciate that. Definitely give this video a like. We appreciate that.
Pod in the description. Check it out right now.
All right, John. Mac Jones, Alabama, draft prospects. He tied Deshaun Watson's record for completions in a championship game. And he broke Joe Burrow's record by 1 yard of passing yards in a national championship game. So he's a combination of Deshaun Watson and Joe Burrow. I say draft that guy number one.
At one point in time, like early in the fourth quarter, I looked at his stats. He had like 465 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, oh my God.
I do think before we get to his draft, tell me if you agree with this. I think he does. His year gets lost a little bit.
Yeah.
He was a 77% passer. 77. He threw 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions.
How many? Say that one more time.
77%.
Yeah.
41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions.
I think part of it getting lost is typically when you have that type season as a quarterback, you're just the shoe-in to be the best player in your team, or at least us view you that way. His wide receiver won the Heisman Trophy. So that shows you. And I think his running back over the year was I'd say coming into the year, Najee Harris was like third, fourth, second pick, round pick, became kind of a star. Like, damn, is this guy the best running back? Is this guy going to be like a 10-year NFL pro? So you just had two guys, and then just anytime you're at Alabama, Nick is the kid. We just talk about Saban more and the program. But you had a star running back and a star wide receiver, and really Waddle. Remember those first couple games? We did a couple like videos like, this guy's killing it, guy.
Yeah.
He breaks his leg, and he goes away. Which, in a weird way, I wonder if Waddle breaking his leg, they just would have split so much, led to Devontae getting the Heisman, right? Devontae probably doesn't win the Heisman if Waddle stays, just because those targets would have been gone both ways, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Waddle was getting a ton. Remember early on in the season, Waddle was dominating.
Waddle might win it. Hell, Mac Jones might win it.
I think it's more likely Mac Jones, that 40 goes to maybe 50.
I mean, it's just, and they would just demolish people. Now, the question is, what is he as a pro? And I think one thing that I've heard that's interesting is that, and maybe you've said this. Actually, before I even get into this, where do you think he gets drafted at this point? It's early. There's a lot that can still happen.
What would I do?
Well, both.
I think he ends up going in the top 50.
Okay.
And probably most likely late first, somewhere in the second round. For me, I view him as a backup, so I'd say middle third later.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well, I think you're on the right track with both your prediction and your.
But I mean, with quarterbacks, I would say that first round is not out of the realm of possibility. We've just seen the history of. I'm sure he's a super high character. Seems like people love him. Like he's very liked in the program.
Yeah. He
like waited his turn. It's like, well, why didn't he start? I don't know. They had Tua, right? It's not like, it was one of those Trubisky. Like, why didn't he start at UNC? Well, they had the Haberman starting above him. It was like, yeah, Tua.
Yeah.
I think it's an easy one to like kind of, and then he immediately got his spot. Remember last year and started playing well. Remember he played well in the Auburn game. He just destroyed Michigan. And this year it was like pedal to the metal, like it's on like Donkey Kong.
I remember thinking once
he couldn't have done any more for himself.
Yeah,
right.
I remember thinking once Tua went out last year, like, well, this is over, and people were like, no, this Mac Jones guy, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And then it was, oh my God, this Mac Jones guy, like he can do it. Like he still has. Yes,
remember he eviscerated Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah,
now,
that's right.
He had all the wide receivers,
that's
and
right.
I just remember like. Through the first quarter, like, oh my God, they could score 70.
And he's still got to make Devontae's open, but he's got to, and sometimes Devontae, like it looks like he's open, but you still got to make the throw. And he really, he throws
a beautiful deep ball. He
no
throws
doubt.
a good deep ball.
So I went back 30 years and then even 40 years on national championship winning quarterbacks. There's 3 kinds, historically. 3 kinds. Number 1 kind is you're great. You won a title. Your team was great. You're great. Joe Burrow was in that category. Joe Burrow still has his career to play out. We'll see. But as a player in college, he was great. His team was great. I'd say Trevor Lawrence was in that category, right? He was great. His team was great. There's the second category, which is
Cam Newton.
Yeah, Cam Newton. He was great. And his career played out, showed that he was worthy of the pick.
Yeah.
The second kind of national championship quarterback, second of 3, is we think you're great, but you tricked us. And there aren't many guys like this, but like Matt Leinart, right? He went 10th. Vince Young went 3rd. We could debate Jameis. I would say Jameis I don't think he tricked us.
I'd say he's better than those guys, but he's not like in the Cam, Burrow crew, probably.
Tua, we don't know, but I would say from an elite skill set standpoint, we're seeing probably overdrafted at 5. And then the third category is you're not great and nobody really thought you were great. And because of that, what you see is there aren't second-round quarterbacks taken. National championship quarterbacks don't go in the second round. In fact, in the last 30 years, and I actually think I did some spotty research beyond that into the 80s. I think we could probably go back into the last 40 years. The only national championship winning quarterback that went in the second round was Jalen Hurts. And Tua came. I mean, he lost the job to Tua. The rest of them, there's only 2 quarterbacks that won the national championship and went in the third round. 2. Well, and the last one was Brian Griese in 97.
You know why? Because I've done a study on the second-round quarterbacks of just the last decade. They typically are physical freak projects. They're typically like Derek Carr, Deshaun Kaiser, Kaepernick, guys that either played at a smaller level, school, so you got to project, or they didn't produce enough, but they have these physical attributes. They're kind of more like an NBA pick in the second round, not based on like, it's not based on winning or anything. It's really more on like a physical attribute guy in the second round that needs work.
Right? Yeah, either he wasn't on a good enough team.
Drew Lock, usually probably on teams that don't win enough, so you got to project it a little bit.
Right.
They're usually a complicated Dalton, who's like, I think this guy could be a starter, but not sure. They're usually more of a project.
Then there's like a Tebow, and I don't need Leinart. Like Leinart was going to get picked there anyway, but I do think when you have guys who aren't physical freaks going high, they're coming off of great teams. It has to, right? You can't be a non-physical freak and get drafted in the top 10 unless you're coming off a great team. So, but by and large, what we see is Cardale Jones, 4th round, A.J. McCarron, 5th round, McElroy, 7th round, Matt Flynn, Matty Mock, Ken Dorsey, 7th rounders, Craig Krenzel, 5th rounders. Chris Winkie was a 4th rounder. He's one of the higher drafted national championship quarterbacks in the last 30 years.
I do think that's going to change dramatically. I don't think those type guys with the way football works will exist on the top teams anymore.
I think you're
right.
Think
that's fair?
Yeah, I do think that's fair. But I also would say like look at Mac Jones. His arm is not plus. It's good enough though, right? What would you say about his arm?
Yeah, I mean it's a middle of the road NFL arm.
Certainly
good
his
NFL
mobility
arm.
Is not. You would not call him a top 10 pick without this production.
Yeah.
My ultimate point is if you look at
what I would do is like if I put Joe Burrow on Fresno State, I think he'd be a really good player. If I put Mac Jones on like Nevada or Fresno State, is he anywhere near a first round? Probably not, right?
Right. He wouldn't be near a first. Doesn't mean he couldn't develop into a good pro, but it'd be a big projection. My ultimate point is this. If a guy wins a national championship and you go, not a first rounder, I think he's a second rounder. He's probably a 4th rounder. You're probably looking at him with national championship glasses on.
Again, I think moving forward, I agree with everything you've said, and the study proves it out. I think
thanks for calling it a study.
As we go in the next decade, it's kind of clear that you need an NFL quarterback now to compete to win national championships. And I'd say that the first probably 20 years of our lifetime, being born in the 80s and definitely the 90s and even the early 2000s, you could build it like a 1980s NFL team. It's like, I just got Jim McMahon is my quarterback, but I got an elite defense and a run. I got sweetness. Like that's just not how you need a top quarterback now in college and the pros.
Yeah.
I think that's changed pretty quickly. Like look at Saban. Like Saban's like, I got to get elite guys at quarterback and offense. He pivoted. I think the game has changed.
Well, you're right. Mac Jones is an outlier for Saban.
But I think Mac Jones is still like the type guy like you could have put on those early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s Ohio State or Miami teams. Like he's that type guy. And that's where I do think there's going to be some negativity pushback on him. Like, I don't see it, right? Where it's like Trevor Lawrence. And that's why I like Justin Fields still. Like he's got this raw physical talent that I can mold. And maybe it doesn't work, but I'm taking a chance with a physical guy. With Mac Jones, like what's his ceiling? Like as high as other guys' floors? That's where I could not take that guy in the first round. And I wonder if these studies are being done more and more now just because of the impact of drafting a quarterback. I think drafting a second-round quarterback is the worst thing you can do because the majority of them don't hit. And then the majority, when you have a second-round quarterback on your roster, your fans and from the outside, it's like, well, you got to make him the starter. You got to be a franchise guy. And it's like you see it with Drew Lock. It's like, well, like Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr are really the best 2 second rounders of the last decade. And it shows you, like, that's the best case scenario.
And I even think they're in a little bit of a different category in that Carr physically belonged, and you could see it right away in his NFL career.
It was a smaller school thing.
Yeah, that his physical tools existed. So Kaepernick was a second rounder. Physical tools.
And Kaepernick was coming from that unique offense that basically the Niners just started running, right?
Yeah.
Because we saw him try to run the normal offense and he couldn't. The one thing with Derek and even Kaepernick was a physical freak, right? He's 6'5", he has a huge arm, he could fly. Derek, like you said, had a lot of his arm talent meshed with a lot of first round guys. He was really early in the second round. Like I would imagine a lot of teams had him in like late first round picks, but if you're drafting 10th, you're like, well, I don't have a pick in the 20s. What do I do?
Yep.
And looking back, the Browns, just screwed up. Remember, I think was Kyle there? He wanted Derek, and they took Johnny Manziel because the bum told him to take Johnny. Well, that's the one thing that Mac and I think Trask are going to have going for them is when you do, and this is where you got to be careful, you start bumping him up the draft board because of character. And it's like, his skills are just, guy, he's he's on an all-star team. I think Bama on offense has really become an all-star team. Just look, I'm watching that game and going,
well, they're beating everybody the way an all-star team would.
Here's what I know. Ohio State, I just look at their recruiting rankings the last 5 years. Like every guy on this field is an elite guy. Like beside Bama, they just could have gone to any school they wanted to in the country. Like if they told Kirby, I want in, they're like, you're in, right? If they told Lincoln Riley, I want in, they're like, you're in. Like they got the cream of the crop.
Every Nick Saban, I saw somebody tweet this. Every Nick Saban recruit has won a national championship.
But I'm talking about Ohio State's guys. I'm saying Ohio State's crew of guys, probably a lot of them had Bama offers, and any other school beside Bama and Ohio State would have gladly taken that. The majority of the guys that were playing last night,
right?
And Mac Jones's team made them look like Arizona State or something. It was crazy. Like I had to take a sit back and go, this shouldn't be this easy against these guys. We expected against Notre Dame. You're like, well, they don't have the speed. Well, Ohio State does, and they made them look fucking terrible. And to me, that diminished Mac a little bit. And maybe it's unfair, and we'll find out over the next 5 years. And it made me think more of like Devontae, Waddle, Menchie, and Najee. Like those guys are just better than these other guys.
Yep.